Algebra Test 5. Number 1. A train travels at a rate of 123,200 yards per hour. So that's important information right there. How fast does a train travel in miles per hour? And then it tells us the conversion rate. 1 mile is equal to 1760 yards. So this is just a conversion problem where we use our unit multiplier. So we always start with what they gave us to begin with. So we starting at 123,200 yards per 1 hour. And then we always multiply it by our unit multiplier. And remember, we're trying to get rid of yards and go to miles. So therefore, we want yards on the bottom and miles on top. So therefore, our yards will cross cancel and we'll only be left with miles. But now I need to go fill in that information. We know that 1,760 yards is equal to 1 mile. So that's our unit multiplier, and now we just multiply across. So 123,200 times 1 is 123,200. We're left with miles. Over 1 hour times 1760 is 1760, and then we just have hour. So at this point, it's just a division problem. We have to divide 123,200 divided by 1,760. And when we do that, we get 70, and we're left with miles per hour. So always make sure, we'd have miles per hour. That's what they wanted our answer in, so we are good, and that's our final answer. Number 2, identify the terms in the expression. Remember, terms are separated by addition and subtraction signs. So we have 3 terms in this problem, but they want us to identify them. So we would say our first term is 7AB. Our second term is right after the addition sign, so it's this, 9C. And our third term is this whole thing right here, this 12A over 5B. And those are your 3 terms. Number 3, the stem and leaf plot shows the scores on a math test. Find the median score on the math test. So we want to find the median. Remember, median is the middle. So we could list all the numbers out, or we could just count inwards. So we have 58, and over here we have 98. Then we have 63, 98, 67, 95, 69, 91. And then we keep going. We have 70, 88, 70 again, 84, 73, 82, 77, 81. And notice there are 2 numbers left. We have 78. So remember, this is your tens and this is your ones. And then we have 80, so we have 80. So when you have 2 middle numbers, you have to find the average of these 2 numbers. Sometimes it might be a little difficult to figure out what it is, so you have to add them 2 together and then divide by 2. This one is pretty easy to see. The middle number is 79, so that's your median. Number 4, the area of a square rug is 225 square feet. What is the length of the rug? So this one is kind of the opposite of finding area. We know that area equals length times width. But since this is a square rug, we know that the sides are exactly the same. So like length is the same as length. So we also could have written it as length squared. So if we know the area is 225, we need to find what number squared gave us 225. So to undo this square, because we want L by itself, we don't want this square here. Remember, we take the square root because that will undo the square and the square root. But if we do something to one side of an equation, we have to do it to the other. So therefore, length equals 15, and it was in feet, so make sure you put your units. So 15 feet is the length of each side. And that makes sense if you had a square rug and each side was 15. 15 times 15 would give you an area of 225. Number 5 is a simplification problem, and we just need to know our rules for when you are multiplying what you do to exponents. So first off, we have an a cubed and an a to the 4th. Remember, when we are multiplying, if the bases are the same, you keep the base just as it is, and you add the exponents together. So 3 plus 4 would give us 7. Next, we have b squared times b7 times b to the 4th. So I'm going to go ahead and write my base, which is b. I'm not going to put a multiplication sign in between those because it's implied that they're multiplying. And now I just go through and add all of my exponents. So 2 plus 7 plus 4 is going to give me 13. And that is as far as we can go because we can't combine the a and the b. All right, another simplification problem, and this is just following our order of operations. So remember PEMDAS, we do parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication, division, left to right, addition, subtraction, left to right. So I'm going to start with exponents. So here is one right here and one right here. So I'm going to go through and simplify those and just rewrite everything else in between. So we have 25 minus 4 divided by 2 plus 6 times 8. Next, we do multiplication and division from left to right. So here's a division problem, and we also have a multiplication problem here. So I can go ahead and go and simplify both of those. 25 minus 4 divided by 2 is 2, plus 6 times 8 is 48. And now we have addition, subtraction, and we just go from left to right. So 25 minus 2 is 23, plus 48, and we get 71. And that is your final answer. Number 7, absolute value problem. So notice we have a negative on the outside of the absolute value, so that just stays there in our answer. And now we simplify within our absolute value. 9 minus 4 is 5. So your answer is negative 5. Okay, another simplifying problem. Again, got to follow our order of operations, and we have to start within our innermost parentheses. Remember, we got our PEMDAS. So we start with parentheses, and our innermost parentheses is this 5 minus 3. So we have 6 plus 2, and then 5 minus 3 is 2 cubed plus 4. And now within these brackets, I need to do exponents. So we have 6 plus 2. 2 cubed is 8 plus 4. And I still have parentheses, so I still have to finish within these brackets. So 6 plus 2, 8 plus 4 is, oops, I forgot my 2 there. 6 plus 2, and then 8 plus 4 is 12. And now I have, this is multiplication, and then I have an addition right here. So I'm going to do the multiplication first. So I have 6 plus 24, which is going to give me 30. Okay, we have a positive and negative division problem. So it's 4.5 divided by a negative 9. So I have a positive and a negative. Whenever you have a positive and negative, I know my answers are already going to be negative. So now I just need to figure out the division. 9 goes into 4 0 times, but it goes into 45 5 times. So my answer is negative 5/10. Okay, this is a distributive property problem. So we got to take this whole term right here and multiply it to each of the two terms within my parentheses. One of the biggest mistakes I see is people forgetting to multiply to this last term. So don't forget it has to go to every term inside the parenthesis. So first off, we have negative AB times BC squared. So I know it's going to be negative. Then I have A, and then I have two B's. So when I multiply those together, I add their exponents, which if you don't see anything, it's implied that there's a 1 the exponents, that becomes squared, and then c squared. And then I have minus, and then I have negative a times a squared. So that's going to give me negative a cubed now, b. And now I'm not quite done. I don't like to leave two negatives like that right next to each other. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative ab squared c squared plus, whenever you have two negatives together, it becomes a plus, a cubed b. And that is just more simplified. So I want to leave it like that. And of course, we can't combine these anymore because these are not like terms. Number 11 is combining like terms. So let's start with our first term. We have 3x cubed. So I'm going to look and see that we have another one that's an x cubed. So I can combine those. And remember, when you're adding and subtracting with like terms, you only add or subtract the coefficients. So 3 plus 2 is 5, but then their like terms stay the same. You just keep it x cubed. Next, we have a y squared and another y squared. Now remember, there's really a 1 in front of there. We just don't write it usually. So that's going to be plus 4y squared. Number 12, Kate is knitting a 90-inch skirt at the rate of 8 inches per day. Write a rule in function notation to find the number of inches she has left to knit at the end of any given day. Let D represent the number of days spent knitting. We know she has a 90-inch scarf and she's doing 80 inches per day. So that's some important information. So remember, function notation is where instead of saying y equals, you say f of x equals, or whatever your variable is. So in this case, it's going to be f of d. So we'll just erase these because we don't need those. Let me get back to blue. So we know that she has what she wants to finish with, or she's doing a 90-inch scarf. So that's how much the total is going to be. So we have 90 inches, but each day she's going to reduce that by 8 inches. So we're going to say we're going to reduce that by 8 inches per day. We don't know how many days that is though, so that's what we're going to say 8 times D. So again, we want to make sure that we put our equal sign here and that both of these are D, and then that is your rule in function notation. There are 9 blue marbles, 2 red marbles, and 1 green marble in a bag. If a marble is randomly chosen, what is the probability that it is not blue? So not blue means it could be red or it could be green. So that's what we want, is red or green to be on our numerator. So there are 2 reds and 1 green, so that's 3 total that we could choose from. And then remember, in our denominator, that's the total number of marbles you have. 9 plus 2 plus 1 is going to give us 12. Now we don't want to leave it like that. Always reduce, and that's 1/4. So we have a 1/4 chance, or 1/4 probability of not getting a blue marble. Just be careful on a test. If it says not blue, it means you want red or green, or whatever the other colors might be. Complete the table for the equation. Y equals 3x plus 3. So for these, all they want you to do is take your x value and plug it in and figure out what y would be. So let's start with our first one, x, when x is negative 2. So we have y equals 3, negative 2 plus 3. So that's negative 6 plus 3, and then that's negative 3. So that's our y. And we're going to do that for each one of these. So now we have 0. So y equals 3 times 0 plus 3. That's just 0 plus 3, so 3. And next we have 2. Y equals 3, 2 plus 3. That's 6 plus 3 and 9. Okay, and now let's do our last one, 2/3. So we have y equals, and I'm going to write 3/1. I'm going to write in fraction form since I know this is going to be a fraction that I'm plugging in, plus 3. So our 3's cancel, and we're left with 2 plus 3, which is 5. And there you go. 15, it looks like we are just solving for x. So we have 1/3 times x. So to remember, to undo this, we divide. So technically we should be dividing by 1/3. But remember, when you divide by fractions, you actually flip and multiply. So instead of dividing by 1/3, we are multiplying both sides by 3/1. Because over here on the right, 1/3 times 3/1, our 3's cancel, our 1's cancel. You're just left with x, which is exactly what we want. We want x by itself. And over on the left, we can make this over 1, 2, make them both fractions. We have 3 times -6. So that's -18. And there's your final answer. It doesn't hurt to check. If we have 1/3 and we plug in -18, I'm going to put it over 1, make it a fraction form. That would give us -6. So we're correct. Okay, 16. Again, we need to solve for this. There's a couple ways you can do this. One is you could clear your denominators, and so you don't have to worry about working with fractions. So I'll show you both ways. The first way is I'm going to clear the denominators. And you do that by multiplying through by the least common multiple of all the denominators. So you have 2, 4, and 6, so the LCM is 12. So I'm just going to multiply both sides in every term by 12/1. So let's take this first one, 12/1 times 1/2. Notice the 12 and the 2, they reduce, and that becomes a 6. So it just becomes 6a. Minus, I'll erase that. Now we have 12/1 times 3/4. So the 12 and the 4 can reduce. And then you just have 3 times 3, which is 9, equals, and now over here, we have 12/1 and times 5/6. These reduce, and you are left with 10. So now this is a little bit easier to deal with. So we're just going to add 9 to both sides. So those cancel, and we have 6a equals 19. And then we're going to divide both sides by 6 and get a equals 19/6. I'm just going to leave my answer like that. Okay, so now if you didn't want to have to do the clearing your denominators and you just want to solve it as it is, we'll do it that way too. So I would add 3/4 to both sides. And that would leave me with 1/2 a equals, but now I have to find common denominators. So I have 5/6 plus 3/4. Common denominator will be 12, so I'm going to rewrite my fractions down here. This will be 10, and this would be 9. So that's 19/12. And then just like in that previous problem, instead of dividing over here by 1/2, you actually end up multiplying by 2/1, which means I multiply this side by 2/1. Also, you're multiplying by the reciprocal. All of these cancel, and we're left with a equals. Over here, we can reduce. That becomes a 1. Here's a 6. And we are left with 19/6. So we got the exact same answer. It just depends on if you're fine dealing with fractions or if you just want to get rid of the fractions right from the get-go. Okay, again, you can do this problem 2 different ways. You can just do it with the decimals, or you could clear your decimals from the beginning. I don't like working with decimals, so I'm going to first just clear this by getting rid of the decimals. So we are going to multiply this by 10, because if I multiply all of these numbers in here, all these terms by 10, the decimal moves over just one place and it makes all of those whole numbers. So this first one just becomes 3r plus 2 equals 17. And that's much easier to work with. So we have -2 on both sides. And we have 3r equals 15. Divide both sides by 3, and we get r equals 5. Now let's do it the other way. So let's rewrite this, and I'll just show you just in case you don't like clearing your decimals. So we're going to subtract 0.2, subtract 0.2, and we have 0.3r equals 1.5, and then we have to divide both sides by 0.3. So we have 1.5 divided by 0.3. And remember, we never divide by decimals, so we have to move our decimal over. So now it's just 15 divided by 3, which is 5. So we get the exact same answer. Okay, number 18, solving for x. And this time there's no fractions or decimals, so we can just get right into it. So we want x by itself, so that means I got to get rid of that 6. So since it's plus 6, I'm going to do the opposite and subtract it. So over here, those cancel, and we're left with x equals. Now we have negative 13 minus 6. So remember, you always add a line, change the sign. So that's really a negative 13 plus a negative 6, which will give you a negative 19. And then let's just double check our work. We have negative 13 equals negative 19 plus 6, and that would give us negative 13. So we're good. Number 19, evaluate when x is 4, y is 3, and z is negative 2. So that means we just need to go and plug in these numbers. So everywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug in a 4. And then we have 3 times y times z, which is negative 2, all over x times z, which is 4 times negative 2. So let's start with our top. We have 4, and then in parentheses, we have 3 times 3 is 9, times a negative 2 is negative 18, all over a negative 8. And then let's simplify the top again. 4 times a negative 18 is a negative 72 over a negative 8. And notice I have a negative divided by a negative, so I know my answer is going to be positive. 72 divided by 8 is 9. Okay, number 20, evaluate when m equals 5 and n equals 2. So again, I just go in and plug in my numbers. So we have 2, 5 minus 2, that doesn't look like a minus, cubed, plus 3, 5 squared. Okay, follow order of operations. So I'm going to start with my parentheses. We have 2, 3 cubed plus 3, 5 squared. Now we have exponents, and we have 2 exponents, so I'm going to go and do both of those. So that's 27 plus 3. 5 squared is 25. So now 2 times 27 is 54. Plus 3 times 25 is 75. And when I add those two together, I get 129.